The drunk man's hand closed around Emily Carter's wrist like a trap, and he yanked her off the bar stool as if she weighed nothing at all. "A woman like you," he sneered, his breath sour with whiskey, "sitting alone at 2 in the morning. You're practically begging for company." The whole bar went quiet. Every man in that room looked down at his drink. Every man except one. In the far shadows, the most feared mafia boss in all of Chicago slowly set down his glass. And for the first time in 20 years, Adrian Moretti felt something he believed he had buried forever. Because Emily Carter did not scream, she did not cry, she smiled. Before we go any further, if you love stories about quiet, underestimated people who turn out to be stronger than anyone imagined, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the very end, because this story only gets better. And do me one small favor, leave a comment and tell me the name of the city where you're watching from right now, so I can see just how far this story has traveled tonight. Now let me take you back to that bar and to the woman no one ever saw coming. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, when the rest of the city of Chicago had long since fallen asleep, Emily Carter sat alone at the far corner of an old neighborhood bar, holding a glass of tequila she had barely touched. The bar was called O'Malley's, though old Sean O'Malley had been dead for 9 years, and his nephew ran it now. It was the kind of place that people passed on their way to somewhere better. The kind of place with a cracked leather booth in the back and a jukebox that only played half its songs. A place where nobody asked questions and nobody expected answers. To everyone who happened to glance her way, Emily looked like a woman who had given up on life. She looked like a tired waitress at the end of a double shift. She looked like a lonely stranger with nowhere to be. She looked like exactly the kind of person a city full of powerful people learns to walk right past. But nobody in that bar knew the truth about Emily Carter. Nobody knew that behind her quiet eyes was a woman who had survived a betrayal that would have broken most people in half. Nobody knew she had once stood at the very top of her profession and then watched every single thing he had built come crashing down in a single week. And nobody knew that for 5 long years, in the forgotten corners of this city, she had quietly kept people alive who had nowhere else on earth to turn. Emily was not drinking that night because she wanted to forget. She was drinking because for the very first time in years, she had finally allowed herself one quiet moment to simply exist. Earlier that evening, she had lost a patient, a boy, 14 years old. He had come to her little clinic on the south side with a fever that had gone too far, too fast, and no money for a real hospital, and no papers that any real hospital would honor without a fight. She had done everything she knew how to do, and she knew a great deal, and it had not been enough. When the boy's mother had finally stopped screaming and started crying, Emily had held her until the crying stopped too. Then she had cleaned up. Then she had walked 11 blocks in the cold to a bar where nobody knew her name, and she had ordered one drink she did not intend to finish just so she would have a reason to sit down. That was the woman the drunk man had decided to grab. His name was Tommy Doyle, though Emily did not know that and never would. He and 2 friends had stumbled in 20 minutes earlier, loud and swaying, the kind of loud that fills a room with a bad feeling before anyone says a single word. They had already been thrown out of 2 other places that night. O'Malley's was their 3rd stop, and they were looking for the thing men like that are always looking for. They were looking for someone smaller than they were. They saw Emily sitting alone. They assumed she was weak. They assumed her stillness meant she was frightened, that her silence meant she was soft, that a woman who sat alone at 2 in the morning must be a woman with no one in the world to defend her. And in a way, they were right about that last part. Emily had no one to defend her, but they were wrong about everything else. "Hey," Tommy had said, leaning against the bar 3 stools down. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Emily had not looked up. "You deaf sweetheart?" She had turned her glass a slow quarter turn on the wood and said nothing. One of his friends laughed. "She's ignoring you, Tommy." "Nobody ignores me," Tommy said, and something ugly crept into his voice. He crossed the space between them, and that was when his hand closed around her wrist and yanked, and the whole room went still. Now here is the thing that separated Adrian Moretti from every other man in that bar. Every other man saw a big drunk grabbing a small, tired woman, and their bodies did what bodies do. They froze. They looked away. They told themselves it was not their business. But Adrian, sitting alone in the shadows with a glass of scotch he had been nursing for an hour, saw something entirely different. He saw that Emily Carter's free hand had already found the edge of the bar. He saw that her feet had shifted quietly into a stance he recognized. He saw that in the instant Tommy grabbed her, her eyes had flicked once to the exit, once to the second man, once to the third, and once to the bottle standing within her reach, and then had come to rest on Tommy's face with an expression that had no fear in it at all. Adrian Moretti had spent his entire life reading danger in other people. It was how he had survived, and what he read in Emily Carter in that half a second was not the terror of prey. It was the patience of something far more dangerous, something that had already decided how this was going to end and was simply waiting for the fool to catch up. "Let go of my wrist," Emily said. Her voice was not loud. That was what made it terrible. It was calm and even and almost gentle, the voice of a doctor telling a patient bad news. Tommy grinned. "Or what?" "Or I'm going to have to hurt you," Emily said. "And I really don't want to. I've already had a hard night." The bar held its breath. Tommy laughed in her face. "You hear that, boys? She's gonna hurt me." He leaned down close, so close his nose nearly touched hers. "You know what I think? I think you should smile a little. I think you should learn some manners. I think a woman like you—" He never finished the sentence. Later, the bartender would tell the story 100 times and never quite be able to describe how fast it happened. One second, Tommy Doyle was leaning over a tired woman, and the next second, Tommy Doyle was folded over the bar, his own arm twisted up behind his back. At an angle arms are not supposed to go, gasping like a fish, and the tired woman was standing behind him perfectly composed, applying just enough pressure to keep him exactly where she wanted him. "There," Emily said almost kindly. "Now stay still, and this stops hurting." "You broke it," Tommy wheezed. "You broke my arm." "I didn't break anything," she said. "If I'd broken it, you'd know. Right now you have a dislocated shoulder that I could put back for you if you asked nicely. But you have to ask nicely. Can you do that?" His two friends surged forward. And here is where the story could have gone very badly for Emily Carter alone against 3 men at 2 in the morning. Here is where a night that started with a dead boy could have ended with something even worse. Except that a voice came out of the shadows. "I would sit back down," the voice said. It was not a loud voice. It did not need to be. Everyone in that bar, including Emily, turned toward the corner where a man was rising slowly from a booth, buttoning his jacket, unhurried the way a man moves when he has never once in his life had to hurry. The bartender went white. "Mr. Moretti," he said. I didn't see you there, sir." And that name landed in the room like a stone in still water. The two friends stopped moving. Whatever drunken courage they had been running on drained straight out of their faces because even they drunk, as they were, knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. "Sit down," Adrian said again to the two of them, and they sat. Then he turned to Emily, and for a long moment, the most feared man in the city and the woman no one had ever noticed simply looked at each other across the length of a rundown bar. "You can let him go," Adrian said. "He's finished." Emily studied him. "She did not let Tommy go, not yet." "And who are you," she said, "to tell me what to do?" The bartender made a small, strangled sound. Nobody spoke to Adrian Moretti that way. Nobody ever had. In 15 years of running half the underground business in this city, in 15 years of being the man other dangerous men were afraid of, Adrian had learned that people responded to him in exactly 2 ways. They either wanted something from him or they were afraid of him, usually both. But this woman, this tired woman in a worn coat with a dead boy's blood she had already scrubbed off her hands, looked at him as if he were nobody at all, as if his name meant nothing. As if the whole invisible empire of fear he had spent his life building was simply not in the room. "My name is Adrian Moretti," he said. "That's supposed to mean something to me. It means something to everyone in this room. It appears to mean nothing to you." "You're right," Emily said. "It doesn't." And then to Tommy in that same gentle voice, "I'm going to let go now. When I do, you're going to walk out that door with your friends, and you're never going to touch a woman in a bar again, because next time she might not be as patient as I am. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Tommy gasped. "Yes, God, yes. Let go." She let go. Tommy scrambled off the bar, cradling his arm, and he and his two friends were out the door and into the night before it had even swung shut behind them. And then it was quiet, and it was just the two of them and the bartender pretending very hard to polish a glass that was already clean. Emily sat back down on her stool. She picked up her tequila. Her hand, Adrian noticed, was completely steady. "You didn't need my help," Adrian said. "No," Emily agreed. "I didn't." "Then why did you let him grab you at all?" You saw it coming. I watched you see it coming. You could have moved before he ever touched you. For the first time, something flickered across Emily's face. Not fear, something older and more tired than fear. Because I keep hoping, she said that if I give people one more chance, they'll surprise me. He didn't. They usually don't. She took a small sip of her drink. But every once in a while, somebody does, so I keep giving the chance. Adrian Moretti had built an entire life on the opposite principle. Give no one a chance. Trust no one. Assume the worst and you will rarely be disappointed. It had kept him alive. It had made him rich. It had made him powerful beyond anything the boy he used to be could have dreamed. And it had made him, he understood in that moment, with a clarity that startled him profoundly and completely alone. May I sit? He asked. Emily looked at him for a long moment. It's a free country, she said. Mostly. He sat one stool between them and signaled the bartender for another scotch. For a while, neither of them spoke. The jukebox played something old and shaded and half-broken. You're a doctor, Adrian said finally. Emily's glass paused halfway to her lips. Now, why would you say that? The way you talked about his shoulder, dislocated, not broken, you could put it back. That's not how a person talks. That's how a doctor talks. You're observant. It's kept me alive. He turned his glass slowly on the bar, mirroring, though he did not realize it, the exact gesture she had made 20 minutes before. So which is it? Were you a doctor or are you one? And there it was, the question that opened the door to everything Emily Carter had spent 5 years locking away. She could have lied. She was good at lying now. 5 years of survival had taught her that the truth was a luxury she could rarely afford. But something about the night, the dead boy, the tequila, she had finally let herself taste the strange calm of this dangerous man who had asked to sit rather than simply sitting, made her tell the truth for once. I was, she said, a long time ago, in another life. What happened? She laughed and there was no joy in it. You don't want to hear that story, Mr. Moretti. On the contrary, Adrian said, I find I very much want to hear it, and I am not a man who is often curious anymore. Emily turned on her stool to face him fully. Under the dim light, he could see her more clearly now. She was younger than he'd first assumed, and older in the eyes than her face. There was a kind of iron in her that had nothing to do with muscle. Fine, she said. You want the story. Here's the story. 5 years ago, I was a trauma surgeon at one of the best hospitals in this city. I was good. Not good, actually. I was the best. When they wheeled in the ones nobody else could save, they called me. Car wrecks, gunshots, the worst nights the emergency room ever saw, that was my whole world and I loved it. I saved hundreds of people. I have my mistakes too, everyone does, but God, I saved so many. What happened? Adrian said again quietly. A man came in one night, Emily said. Important man, the kind of man this city protects. He'd been in an accident, except it wasn't an accident. There was a girl in the other car, and she died, and he was drunk, and everyone knew he was drunk, and everyone knew whose fault it was. And a very polite man in a very nice suit came to see me the next morning and explained to me very kindly that the blood test showing how drunk he'd been was going to disappear. That I was going to sign a form saying he'd been sober, that everyone was going to be much happier that way, and there would be a great deal of money in it for me and a great deal of trouble if I said no. Adrian was very still now. And you said no. I said no. Emily's jaw tightened. That girl was 19 years old. She had a mother who came to the hospital and begged me to tell her what happened to her daughter. And I looked at that mother, and then I looked at that form they wanted me to sign, and I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So I said no. And they destroyed you. They destroyed me, Emily said simply. Not all at once. They were patient about it. First there were rumors, then there was an investigation into things I hadn't done. Then there was a scandal in the papers with my face on it, in words like negligence, in words like unstable, in words like danger to patients. By the time they were finished, I had lost my license, my career, my reputation, and just about everyone I'd ever trusted, because it turns out most people would rather believe the newspaper than believe the truth. The man who killed that girl never spent a single day in a courtroom. And I never operated in a hospital again. The bar was silent. Even the jukebox had gone quiet. You could have signed the form, Adrian said. You'd still have everything. I could have, Emily agreed. Most people would have. Most people did, she said. That's how they got away with it. Everyone signed their little form. I was the only one who didn't. She finished her tequila and set the glass down. So no, Mr. Moretti, I'm not a doctor anymore, not officially. Officially, I'm nobody. Officially, I'm a cautionary tale. But you still practice, Adrian said. It was not a question. You said his shoulder like a woman who set a shoulder yesterday. Emily was quiet for a moment, and then because she had already told him so much, she told him the rest. There are people in this city, she said, who fall through every crack there is, people with no money, no papers, no insurance, no one. When they get hurt, when they get sick, when their child spikes a fever at 2 in the morning, there is nowhere for them to go. The hospitals turn them away or bury them in bills they'll spend the rest of their lives paying or call the wrong people on them. So they come to me. I have a room. I have supplies. I mostly beg or borrow. I don't have a license, so what I do isn't strictly legal. But I keep them alive, and I don't ask them for anything they can't give. Adrian Moretti had met a great many people in his life. He had met liars and killers and cowards and thieves. He had met men who would sell their own brothers for a smaller sum than most people would guess. He had met once or twice people of genuine courage, and he had usually watched the world grind them into dust. He had never in his life met anyone like the woman sitting in front of him. Why, he said, why do you do it? You owe these people nothing. The world took everything from you. It would be very easy to hate it. It would, Emily said. Some nights I do. She looked down at her empty glass. I lost a boy tonight. 14. I couldn't save him. That's why I'm here. That's why I finally let myself have a drink after 5 years of not letting myself have anything. Her voice did not break, but it came close. You asked me why. It's because when I'm in that room, when I have my hands on somebody who's dying and I pull them back, that's the only time I'm still me. That's the only thing they couldn't take. And if I stopped, if I let them make me stop, then they really would have won, and I will not let them win, not while I'm breathing. And that was the twist that changed everything for Adrian Moretti. Because for 15 years, Adrian had believed that he understood the world completely. He believed that everyone had a price. He believed that principles were things people talked about right up until the moment they cost something, at which point the principles quietly went away. His entire empire, his entire safety, his entire understanding of how to stay alive was built on that single belief. Everyone breaks, everyone folds. It is only a question of the price. And now at 2:30 in the morning in a bar he had walked into by accident because he could not sleep, a tired woman had just told him a story that made no sense inside his understanding of the world at all. She had been offered everything to sign one form, and she had refused, and she had lost everything. And 5 years later, with every reason to be bitter, with nothing left to protect, she was still out there in the dark, keeping strangers alive for free. She had a price and the world had named it, and she had said no anyway. Adrian did not have a word for what he felt. He had felt fear, and he had felt anger, and he had felt the cold satisfaction of winning. He had not felt this in so long he barely recognized it. It was something like awe. And underneath the awe, quieter and far more dangerous, was something that felt almost like hope. How do you keep it running, he asked. This room of yours. Supplies cost money. You said you have no money. I get by, Emily said, and there was a warning at a door quietly closing. I'm not telling you this because I want anything from you, Mr. Moretti. I've never in my life met a man who offered me something without wanting 3 things back. I don't know what you are exactly, but I know that suit costs more than my whole clinic runs on in a year. And I know the way that bartender looked at you. And I know you don't sit alone in a place like this at 2 in the morning unless you're the kind of man who has reasons to be careful. So whatever it is you're about to offer me, save it. I'm not for sale. I've already proven that once and it cost me everything, and I'd do it again tomorrow. Adrian looked at her for a long, long moment. And then to the astonishment of the bartender, who had been listening to every word while pretending not to the most feared man in Chicago, began to laugh. It was not a cruel laugh. It was not the laugh people in this city had learned to dread. It was a real laugh surprised out of him, warm and low and rusty from disuse. The laugh of a man who has just been told something true after a very long time of hearing only lies. You're not for sale, Adrian repeated, shaking his head. Do you have any idea, Miss Carter, how long it has been since anyone said no to me? I'd guess a while, Emily said. Years, he said. It has been years. Everyone says yes to me. Everyone. Do you know why? Because they're afraid of you. Because they're afraid of me, he agreed. You understand that, and it doesn't frighten you. You said no to me exactly the way you said no to those men who tried to buy your silence, as if the size of the threat simply doesn't enter into it. He shook his head again. I have spent 15 years learning how to read people, and I cannot read you at all. You are the first person in longer than I can remember who I do not understand. There's not much to understand, Emily said. I just don't lie. It's the only thing I have left. It turns out to be worth more than everything else combined. How did you learn to do that? Adrian asked. What you did to Doyle. That wasn't nothing. That was training. For the first time, something almost like a real smile touched the corner of Emily's mouth. My father was a boxer, she said, then a bad boxer, then a drunk. But before all that, he taught his daughter how to not be a victim. It's the one good thing he gave me, and he gave it to me because he was terrified of everything he couldn't protect me from. I spent my whole childhood learning how to read a room and find the exits and end a fight before it starts. And then I spent 20 years learning the body from the inside. You put those two things together. She shrugged. A drunk man who grabs my wrist is the least of my problems. And yet you let him grab you. And yet I let him grab you, she said, because I keep hoping. I told you that already. They sat in silence for a moment. The bartender finally quietly refilled both their glasses without being asked, and neither of them told him to stop. I'm going to tell you something now, Adrian said, and I want you to understand that I have never said it to another living soul. He turned his glass on the bar. I don't sleep. Almost never. 2 or 3 hours if I'm lucky. When I was a boy, I slept fine. And then things happened, the kind of things that happen to boys with no one to protect them, and I stopped. I built everything I've built in the hours when other men are asleep. Tonight I couldn't stand my own house anymore, so I walked. And I walked into this place because the sign was broken and no one would think to look for me here. And I sat in that corner planning to leave in 10 minutes. Why are you telling me this? Emily asked. Because you told me the truth, Adrian said. And I find I don't want to lie to you. It's a strange feeling. I don't enjoy it, but there it is. Emily looked at him, then really looked past the expensive suit and the terrible reputation and the careful stillness. And for a moment she saw something she recognized. She had spent 5 years among people the world had thrown away, and she had learned to see the wound underneath the armor. And this man, this dangerous, powerful, feared man had a wound in him so old it had become the shape of his whole life. You're lonely, she said. It was not an accusation, it was a diagnosis. You've been lonely so long, you don't even feel it anymore. It's just the water you swim in. Adrian did not answer, but he did not deny it either. And that silence said more than any answer could have. I've seen it before, Emily said more gently now. Not in men like you, in old people mostly. People whose husbands and wives are gone, whose children don't call, who sit in an emergency room at 3 a.m. because a stranger in a white coat is the only person who's touched them kindly in a month. That's what you have. You just have it in a nicer suit. You're very direct. I'm a doctor, she said. Or I was. You learn to say the hard thing because the person who won't say the hard thing lets the patient die comfortable and ignorant. I'd rather say the hard thing. And Adrian Moretti, who had ordered men's lives, ended with less emotion than most people used to order dinner. Felt something in his chest he had not felt in decades. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was the feeling of a door he had welded shut a very long time ago, beginning just slightly to move on its hinges. There's a war coming, he heard himself say. He had not planned to say it. It came out of him the way the truth had been coming out of her all night, as if her honesty were contagious. Emily's brow furrowed. A war. I have an enemy, Adrian said. Her name is Victoria Hayes. She wants what I have, and she is very intelligent, and she does not have the one weakness I have, which is that there are still, God help, me a small number of lines I will not cross. She has no such lines, and she is winning. For the first time in 15 years, someone is winning against me, and I have not yet found the way to stop her. He looked at his glass. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Perhaps because you're the one person in this city who can't use it against me. You don't know anyone I know. You don't want anything I have. You'd probably be safer never having heard my name. Something cold moved through Emily. Then some instinct honed by 5 years of survival, some quiet certainty that she had just stepped without meaning to onto the edge of something very deep and very dark. Then maybe you should stop talking, she said carefully. Maybe you should finish your drink and walk back out into the night and forget you ever sat down here. And maybe I should do the same, because I've spent 5 years learning to be invisible, Mr. Moretti, and the last thing on earth I need is to be visible to a man with an enemy. You're right, Adrian said. That would be the wise thing. He set money on the bar far more than the drinks were worth. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. And then he paused, looking down at her, at this woman who had walked into an ordinary bar and turned his entire understanding of the world sideways in the space of an hour. May I ask you one thing before I go, he said. Emily looked up at him. You can ask. The boy tonight, the one you couldn't save, what was his name? The question caught her completely off guard. Of all the things she had expected the most feared man in Chicago to ask her, that was not one of them. And something in her, some wall she had been holding up all night, all week, all 5 years, cracked just slightly at the sound of that question. Because in 5 years, not one single person had ever thought to ask her the name of the one she lost. Marcus, she said. Her voice was not quite steady now. His name was Marcus. He was 14. He liked to draw. His mother showed me his drawings while I was trying to save him. He drew buildings. He wanted to be an architect. He wanted to build things that would still be standing after he was gone. She stopped. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had not been enough. His name was Marcus. Adrian Moretti stood very still. Marcus, he repeated quietly as if committing it to memory. Then he was real, and someone remembered him. That matters, Miss Carter. In my experience, it is nearly the only thing that does. He inclined his head, the smallest gesture of respect. Thank you for the truth. It's rarer than you'd think, and I did not know until tonight how badly I'd been missing it. And then he turned and walked toward the door, and Emily watched him go, this strange, dangerous man who had asked a dying boy's name, and she felt something she did not want to feel and could not quite name. He was almost at the door when she called out to him. Mr. Moretti? He stopped. He turned. This war of yours, Emily said. This Victoria Hayes, you should be careful. I'm always careful, he said. No, Emily said. You don't understand me. You said she has no lines she won't cross. You said the only weakness you have is that you still have a few. A woman like that, a smart woman with no lines, she won't come at you where you're strong. She'll come at you where you're soft. And you just spent an hour telling a stranger in a bar exactly where you're soft. She held his gaze. You told me you were lonely. You told me there are still a few things you care about. If I figured that out in an hour, she'll have figured it out in a year. So whatever it is you care about, whoever it is, you'd better protect them, because that's where she'll aim. For a long moment, Adrian Moretti simply looked at her. He had come into this bar the same man he had been for 15 years. Careful cold, complete alone. And in the space of a single conversation with a woman whose name he had not known 2 hours ago, something fundamental had shifted some plate deep beneath the surface of him, and he understood, with a certainty that frightened him, that he would not be able to shift it back. You're a dangerous woman, Emily Carter, he said quietly. No, Emily said, and she almost smiled. I'm an invisible one. That's different. It's better. You should try it sometime. She turned back to her drink. Good night, Mr. Moretti. I hope your war ends the way you need it to, and I hope for both our sakes that we never see each other again. Adrian did not answer that. He simply opened the door and stepped out into the cold Chicago night. And the door swung shut behind him, and Emily Carter was alone again at the corner of an old neighborhood bar at nearly 3 a.m, exactly the way she had been at the start of the night, except that she was not the same, and neither was he. She finished her tequila. She left money on the bar, though not as much as he had. She pulled her worn coat tight around herself and stepped out into the same cold night, and she walked the 11 blocks home the way she had come, past the shuttered shops in the sleeping city, and she told herself that the strange conversation had meant nothing, that the dangerous man would forget her by morning, that she would slip back into her invisible life and no harm would come of it. She was wrong about all of it, because 3 miles away, in a house with too many rooms and no warmth in any of them, Adrian Moretti sat in the dark and did not sleep, which was ordinary, but he did something that night that was not ordinary at all. He thought about someone other than himself and his enemies and his empire. He thought about a boy named Marcus who wanted to build things that would outlast him. He thought about a woman who had been offered everything and said no. And he thought about a warning delivered by that same woman that had gone straight through all his armor and lodged somewhere he could not reach. Whatever you care about, that's where she'll aim. And Adrian Moretti, who trusted no one, who cared for nearly no one, realized with a slow and creeping dread that after one conversation in a broken-down bar, there was now one more thing in this world that he cared about. And if he had figured that out about himself in a single night, then Victoria Hayes, who was patient and brilliant and had no lines at all, might figure it out too. He had walked into that bar to escape his own house. He had walked out having put a target without meaning to on the back of the one genuinely good person he had met in 15 years. Across the city, Emily Carter climbed the stairs to her small apartment, checked on the little room where she kept the supplies that kept strangers alive, sat down on the edge of her narrow bed, and finally quietly allowed herself to cry for a boy named Marcus, who had wanted to build things. She did not know she had been seen. She did not know she had been marked. She did not know that the invisible life she had built so carefully, brick by careful brick, over 5 long years of surviving, had ended the moment a dangerous man asked a dying boy's name. She only knew that she was tired and that the night was long, and that somewhere out in the sleeping city, for reasons she could not explain, a man who should have been nothing to her was lying awake in the dark thinking about her, and about a war she wanted no part of, and about a line that was about to be crossed. And in the deepest quiet of that Chicago night, in a house with no warmth, in a bar with no name, in a clinic with no license, 3 lives that had never been meant to touch had already silently begun to move toward each other. One woman who had lost everything and kept her soul. One man who had gained everything and lost his. And one enemy out there in the dark, patient and smiling, who was already at that very moment beginning to ask the one question that would set the whole terrible thing in motion. Who is Adrian Moretti afraid to lose, Emily? Carter turned off her light. She lay down in the dark. And for the first time in 5 years, she was not alone in it, though she did not yet know why and would not know for some time. And by the time she understood it, it would already be far, far too late to walk away. 3 days passed, and Emily Carter almost convinced herself that the night at the bar had been a strange dream. Almost, but not quite. Because on the second day, a man in a delivery uniform had knocked on the door of her little clinic and set down 4 heavy boxes without a word. And when she opened them, she found the exact medical supplies she had been rationing for months. Sutures, antibiotics, clean gloves in every size, a portable oxygen unit that would have cost more than she made in a year. There was no note, there was no name. But Emily did not need a name. She knew exactly who had sent it, and she stood in her tiny clinic with a box of gauze in her hands and felt something she did not want to feel, which was gratitude toward a man she had told herself to forget. She almost sent it back. She lifted the phone twice to find a number she did not have. And then Mrs. Alvarez brought in her grandson with a gash across his forehead, and Emily used the new sutures to close it clean and quick, and the boy did not scar. And she thought about the boys she had lost for want of exactly these supplies, and she could not send it back. She hated that she could not send it back. But she could not. What Emily did not know 3 days into her almost forgetting was that on that very same second day, in a very different part of the city, Adrian Moretti had ordered his people to find out everything there was to know about her. He told himself it was strategy. He told himself that a smart man learns everything about everyone who crosses his path, that the woman had walked into his life uninvited, and he simply needed to know whether she was a threat. That was the lie, he told himself. The truth was that he could not stop thinking about her, and it disturbed him more than any enemy ever had. His most trusted man was named Salvatore. Sal had been with Adrian for 20 years, since they were both young and hungry and had nothing, and Sal was the only human being on earth Adrian trusted with anything that mattered. So it was Sal who came into Adrian's study on the morning of the 3rd day, with a folder in his hand and a strange look on his face. "You're going to want to sit down for this," Sal said. "I'm already sitting." "Then you're going to want to pour yourself a drink." Sal set the folder on the desk. "Boss, I've been doing this 20 years. I've pulled files on senators, on cops, on men who wanted us dead. I've never pulled a file like this one." Adrian opened the folder, and for the next 20 minutes he did not say a single word. He read that Emily Carter had graduated first in her medical class. He read that she had been, before her fall, considered one of the finest trauma surgeons in the entire Midwest. The person they flew in the worst cases to the surgeon. Other surgeons called when they were out of options. He read the newspaper stories about her disgrace, and he read between the lines of them the way a man learns to read between lines when his own life has depended on it, and he saw immediately what had really happened. He saw the fingerprints of powerful men on every word. He saw a woman who had been methodically and professionally destroyed, and he saw exactly who had done it because he knew the names. He did business with some of them, and he understood the machine that had ground Emily Carter down because he owned a machine just like it. And then he read the part that made him set the folder down and sit very still for a long time. He read that in the 5 years since her fall in the forgotten neighborhoods of a city that had thrown her away, Emily Carter had saved, by Sal's careful and conservative count, somewhere between 300 and 400 lives. For free. With no license, no hospital, no recognition, no reward. Gunshot wounds the victims were too afraid to report. Births in apartments with no heat. Children with fevers whose parents had no papers and no options. Old men dying alone who wanted at the very end one person who knew their name. There's more, Sal said quietly. The neighborhoods she works in. Boss, some of those are ours. Some of those blocks pay us. And they protect her. I asked around careful, and the second anyone thought I might mean her harm, they went silent. Every one of them. These are people who'd sell their own mother for $100, and not one of them would say a word against her. I've never seen anything like it. They call her the doctor, just the doctor, like there's only one. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. They love her, he said finally. They die for her, Sal said, and she doesn't even know it. That's the thing that got me. She thinks she's invisible. She's the most protected person in the whole South Side, and she has no idea. Adrian closed the folder. He looked out the window at the gray Chicago morning, and a single thought moved through him, cold and clear and terrible. If I can find this out in 3 days, so can Victoria. He had done exactly the thing Emily had warned him not to do. He had cared, and in caring he had aimed a spotlight at the very person he wanted to keep in the dark. His enemy watched him. His enemy always watched him. And a man of his position did not send 4 boxes of expensive medical supplies to an unlicensed clinic on the South Side without someone somewhere noticing. Who else knows we pulled this file? Adrian asked. Just me. Keep it that way. And Sal. Adrian turned from the window. I want a quiet watch on that clinic. Not close. Not so anyone would notice. But if anyone else comes asking about Emily Carter, anyone at all, I want to know the same hour it happens. Sal studied his old friend for a moment, and something passed across his face that was almost worry. In 20 years, he had never seen Adrian Moretti spend a single resource protecting someone who could not do something for him in return. Boss, Sal said carefully. Who is she to you? Nobody, Adrian said. That's a lot of trouble for nobody. She's nobody, Adrian said again more firmly, and Sal, who was wise, let it go. But he did not believe it, and Adrian, if he was honest with himself, did not believe it either. While Adrian was reading her file, Emily was living her ordinary life, unaware that it had already stopped being ordinary. She saw her patients. She stretched her supplies. She did not sleep enough, which was nothing new. And on the 4th night after the bar, something happened that she would spend the rest of her life turning over in her mind, trying to decide whether it had saved her or doomed her. It was nearly midnight. Emily was closing up the clinic alone as always when there was a knock at the back door. Not the front. The back, the one only her patients used, the desperate ones who came in the dark. She opened it expecting a frightened mother or a bleeding kid. Instead, she found Adrian Moretti leaning against the door frame, and he was covered in blood, and most of it was his own. For one full second, Emily Carter simply stared at him. He was pale. His jacket was gone. His white shirt was soaked dark red down the left side, and he had one hand pressed hard against his ribs. And the calm control that had defined every second of their first meeting was gone, replaced by the gray focus of a man using the last of his strength to stay upright. I need, Adrian said, and his voice was steady even now, even like this, to apologize for coming here. And then his knees went, and Emily caught him before he hit the floor. Everything that happened next, Emily did on instinct, because instinct was the only thing that worked when the thinking part of her brain was screaming that the most dangerous man in Chicago was bleeding out in her arms, and that she was at this exact moment choosing a side in a war she knew nothing about. She got him inside. She got the door lock key. She got him onto the table, and she cut his shirt away, and she saw the wound, and the doctor in her, the real Emily, the one they could never fully kill, took over completely. Gunshot, she said more to herself than to him. Through and through, you're lucky. It missed everything that matters, but you've lost a lot of blood, and if you'd waited another 20 minutes to find help, you'd be dead. Why did you come here? Because, Adrian said through his teeth as she worked, there is no hospital in this city I can walk into without Victoria knowing within the hour. And there is no one in my own organization I could be certain wasn't paid by her. And there is exactly one person in Chicago, I am completely certain, does not want anything from me and cannot be bought at any price. His eyes found hers. I came here because you are the only person I trust. And I realize how insane that is given that we have spoken exactly once. Emily's hands did not stop moving, but something in her chest turned over. You trust me because I can't hurt you, she said. That's not the same as trust. It's the closest thing I have, Adrian said. Forgive me if it's imperfect. She got the bleeding stopped. She cleaned the wound and packed it and stitched what needed stitching, and she started fluids from the very supplies he had sent her 3 days before, which struck them both at the same moment, and Adrian let out a breath that was almost a laugh. My own gauze, he said. Your own gauze, Emily agreed grimly. I should have sent it back. I knew I should have sent it back. I'm glad you didn't. You're glad because it's keeping you alive. That too, Adrian said and closed his eyes. For a while, she let him rest, watching his numbers, watching his color come back by degrees. And in the quiet alone with an unconscious Mafia boss on her clinic table at 1 a.m, Emily Carter had time to understand exactly how much trouble she was in. She was not a fool. She knew what it meant that he had come here. She knew that if his enemies found out, she would become a target. She knew that the invisible life she had guarded for 5 years was over. And underneath all of that fear was one more feeling she liked even less, which was that some traitorous part of her was glad he had come to her, glad that of all the doors in Chicago he could have knocked on, he had knocked on hers. When Adrian woke an hour later, she was sitting across from him with a cup of coffee she had made too strong and a face that had gone hard. You're awake, she said. Good. Now you're going to explain to me exactly what you've dragged into my clinic, and you're going to explain all of it because I just risked everything I have to keep you alive, and I have earned the truth. Oh, and Adrian looked at her, this woman who had every right to be terrified and was instead furious, and he found that he respected her more in that moment than he had ever respected anyone. You have, he agreed. You've earned it. So here it is. He shifted, wincing against the pillow she had put behind him. The woman I told you about, Victoria Hayes. 3 years ago, she was nobody, a lawyer for people like me, very smart, very ambitious. And then she decided she didn't want to work for the empires anymore. She wanted to own one, so she began very quietly, very patiently to take mine. She's been at it for 2 years. Tonight, she stopped being quiet. That was her people who shot me. She's decided the patient game is over. She's coming for everything now all at once, and she nearly got me on the first move. Why, Emily asked, why now? Because she's found my weakness, Adrian said. And she thinks I've gotten soft, and a soft man is a man you can finally kill. He met her eyes. For 15 years, I had no weakness, Emily. None. There was no one I cared about, nothing that could be used against me. Sal maybe, but Sal can protect himself. Sal has always been able to protect himself. Beyond that, nothing. You cannot threaten a man who loves nothing. You cannot take a hostage from a man who has no one. That was my armor. That was why I survived when better men died. And now, Adrian was silent for a long moment. And now, he said quietly, 4 nights ago, I walked into a bar I'd never been to, and I sat down next to a woman who wasn't afraid of me, and I told her things I have never told anyone, and I sent her 4 boxes of supplies like a fool, and I have thought about her every hour since. So you tell me, Emily, do I have a weakness now? Because it seems to me that I do. And it seems to me that the very warning you gave me in that bar 4 nights ago about protecting whatever I care about has already come true. I came here tonight because you were the only person I trusted. But part of me came here because I could not stand the thought of dying without seeing you one more time. And I hate that. I hate it. Because it makes me weak, and weak men in my world do not live long, and worse, far worse, it makes you a target. The coffee cup went still in Emily's hands. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city was silent. Inside, the small machine that monitored his heart beeped its steady rhythm, and Emily Carter felt the last piece of her invisible life quietly fall away. "You shouldn't have come here," she said finally, and her voice was not angry now. It was tired and it was frightened, and underneath both of those, there was something she refused to name. "You should have died in an alley before you brought this to my door. Do you understand what you've done? I have spent 5 years being no one, being nowhere, being a rumor that desperate people whisper to each other. That was safe. Being invisible was the only safety I had left after they took everything else. And you, just in one night, made me visible to the most dangerous person in this city." "I know," Adrian said. "I know exactly what I've done. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending I'm sorry, because if I'd stayed away, I'd be dead. And God help me, Emily, I wanted to live more than I wanted to protect you, and that is the most honest and the most shameful thing I have ever said to another person." Emily stood up. She walked to the small window and looked out at nothing. When she spoke, her back was to him. "There's something you should know about me," she said. "Something that wasn't in whatever file you pulled. And I know you pulled a file, don't insult me either. Everyone in my neighborhood knew someone was asking questions 3 days ago. They warned me. They always warned me." She turned around. "So here's what your file didn't tell you. The man whose blood test I refused to fake 5 years ago. The important man the city protected. Do you want to know his name?" Adrian went very still. "Tell me." "His name," Emily said, "was Gerald Hayes, Victoria Hayes's father." The heart monitor beeped once, twice, 3 times into a silence that had suddenly gone electric. "That's not possible," Adrian said slowly. "It's very possible," Emily said. "I looked her up after you said her name in that bar. I couldn't sleep either that night. And there she was. Victoria Hayes, whose father Gerald killed a 19-year-old girl 5 years ago while driving drunk and got away with it because a very polite man in a very nice suit made a blood test disappear and destroyed the one doctor who wouldn't play along." Her voice shook now, just slightly. "The girl who died was named Cassidy. She was 19. And the man who killed her, the man I refused to protect, was the father of the woman who just tried to kill you." Adrian Moretti had not been genuinely surprised by anything in a very long time. He was surprised now. "You knew," he said. 4 nights ago in that bar when I said her name, you already knew who she was." "I found out after," Emily said. "That night when I got home. And I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself you'd forget me and I'd never see either of you again. And it was just a terrible coincidence in a city full of terrible coincidences." She laughed, and there was no humor in it at all. "And now you're bleeding on my table. And it turns out the woman hunting you is the daughter of the man who destroyed me. Tell me, Mr. Moretti, does that sound like a coincidence to you? Because it's starting not to." It did not sound like a coincidence to Adrian. It sounded like something far worse. It sounded like a design. "When did Victoria first move against me?" he asked, and he was thinking fast now, the pain forgotten, the strategist fully awake. 2 years ago, I told you. "And when did her father die? Because he did die. I remember it, a heart attack 3 years back. So think, Emily. 2 years ago, Victoria began taking my empire. And here tonight, 3 days after I sent supplies to your door, she makes her first open move to kill me. Why now? What changed 3 days ago?" Emily's face went white as she understood. "Me," she whispered. "I changed. You came to me." "You," Adrian agreed grimly. "Victoria has been watching me for 2 years, patient waiting, taking pieces. And in 15 years of watching, she never once had a way to truly hurt me, because there was nothing I cared about. And then 3 days ago, I did the one thing I had never done. I cared about someone. I sent supplies to a clinic, and she saw it. And she must have looked into who I was helping the same way I looked into you, and she found the same file I found. Except that where I found a good woman worth protecting, Victoria found something else entirely." He looked at her, and his eyes were dark. "She found the doctor who destroyed her father. She found out that the man she's been trying to kill for 2 years is suddenly protecting the one person in the world she hates as much as she hates me. Emily, she doesn't just want me dead now. She wants us both dead, and she wants it to feel like justice." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Emily sat down slowly. All the strength seemed to go out of her at once, not because she was weak, but because the shape of the thing had finally become clear, and it was so much bigger and darker than she had let herself imagine. She had spent 5 years believing the worst thing that would ever happen to her had already happened. She had been wrong. "So that's it," she said quietly. "That's the whole trap. You cared about me, and that made me visible. And it turns out I was already the one person she hates most, and now she has both of us in one place and a reason to feel righteous about killing us." She looked up. "You didn't just put a target on me, Adrian. You handed her the perfect revenge. She gets to destroy the man who's beaten her for 2 years and the woman who ruined her father, and she gets to tell herself she's an avenging angel while she does it." "Yes," Adrian said. He did not soften it. She would not have wanted him to. "That's exactly what I did, and I would give anything to undo it. But I can't. So the only question left is what we do now." "We," Emily said sharply. "There's no we. There's you with your empire and your soldiers and your 15 years of surviving. And there's me, an unlicensed doctor with a room full of your gauze and a knack for not getting my wrist broken in a bar. There's no we." "There is now," Adrian said, and there was iron in it. "Victoria has made it a we. Whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, she has decided we die together. And so we had better decide to live together because she will not stop Emily. I know her. She's patient and she's brilliant and she has no lines. She will burn your clinic to reach you. She will kill your patients to draw you out. She will hurt every person on the South Side who ever called you the doctor until you have nowhere left to hide. And then she will kill you and she will smile while she does it because in her mind you murdered her father. You didn't kill anyone. You told the truth. And it is going to get you killed unless we are smarter than she is." Emily was quiet for a long time. She looked at the man on her table, the most feared man in the city, brought low by a bullet, independent tonight entirely on her hands and her silence. She looked at the boxes of supplies he had sent. She looked at the small window that had been until 4 nights ago a view onto a safe and invisible life. "You want to know the worst part?" she said finally. "Tell me." "The worst part is that I refuse to run." She said it slowly as if discovering it as she spoke. "Every logical thing in me says I should take what money I have and disappear tonight and never look back. Change my name. Go somewhere Victoria Hayes has never heard of. That's what a smart person would do. That's what a person who wanted to live would do." She met his eyes. "But I spent 5 years being underestimated by people who thought a woman with nothing left would be easy to erase. And I am done being erased, Adrian. If I run now, then Victoria's father wins all over again 5 years later. The girl he killed, Cassidy, she doesn't get to run. Her mother doesn't get to run. Every patient of mine who has nowhere to go, they don't get to run. So I won't either. I'd rather stand in the open and let them see exactly who they underestimated." Adrian Moretti looked at Emily Carter, and for the second time in his life, he laughed, the real laugh, the rusty one, the one he had thought was gone forever. "You're impossible," he said. "You know that I have spent my whole life around men who would betray anyone to save themselves, and I finally meet someone who won't run to save her own life, and it's an unlicensed doctor who could break my wrist. Of course it is. Of course it's you." "I'm serious," Emily said. "I know you are," Adrian said. "That's what terrifies me." He tried to sit up and the pain stopped him, and Emily was at his side in an instant, easing him back down with hands that had held a dying boy 4 nights ago. "Don't," she said. "You lost too much blood. If you tear those stitches, you'll bleed again, and I'll have to start over, and I'm out of the good sutures, so lie still." "Emily." He caught her wrist, not the way Tommy Doyle had, gently, and she went still. "If you won't run, then I need you to hear me. You will not stand alone. I have resources. I have people. I have 15 years of knowing how men like me survive against people like her. I brought this to your door, and I will not let you face it alone. I don't care what it costs me. Do you understand? For the first time in 15 years, there is something I am not willing to lose, and it is standing right in front of me, telling me she won't run, and I will burn my entire empire to the ground before I let Victoria Hayes touch you." Emily looked down at his hand on her wrist. She did not pull away. "You barely know me," she said quietly. "I know that you were offered everything and said no," Adrian said. "I know that you lost your whole life and kept your soul. I know that you save people who can never repay you, and you do it in the dark where no one will ever thank you. I know that 4 nights ago you warned a dangerous stranger to protect whatever he cared about, And tonight you saved his life anyway, even knowing it would cost you everything, Emily. I have known men for 20 years. I don't know as well as I know you. Knowing someone isn't about time. It's about what you see when it costs them something to show it. And I have seen exactly who you are. The heart monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Outside, the first gray hint of dawn was beginning to touch the edge of the ski. And Emily Carter, who had not let anyone in for 5 years, who had built her walls high and thick, and told herself they were the only thing keeping her alive, felt one of those walls, just one, quietly come down. Then we're going to do this my way, she said, and pulled her wrist gently free and stood. And there was something new in her posture, something that had not been there when the night began. Not your way, not violence, not a war of soldiers, because you'll lose that Adrian. She's already beating you at that game. If we fight her the way she wants to fight on her ground, we lose. So we're not going to. Then how? We're going to do the one thing her father spent everything to prevent, Emily said. The thing I refused to help him hide 5 years ago. The thing that started all of this. Her eyes had gone hard and clear, and certain the eyes of the surgeon. She used to be the one they could never fully kill. We're going to tell the truth. All of it. About her father, about the girl he killed, about the machine that covered it up, about whatever Victoria is doing now to build her empire. She learned everything she knows from watching her father buy his way out of murder. So she believes the truth can always be bought and buried. She spent her whole life believing it because it worked for him. Emily leaned in. So we're going to bury her in the one thing she doesn't believe in. We're going to make the truth so loud, so public, so impossible to erase, that all her money and all her soldiers can't make it disappear. We're going to do to her exactly what I refused to let her father do to that girl. We're going to make sure the truth survives. Adrian Moretti stared at her. And then slowly, despite the pain, despite the blood loss, despite 15 years of solving every problem with fear and force, he began to smile because he understood finally that he had been playing the wrong game his whole life, and that the woman in front of him had just in a single sentence shown him a way to win that had never once occurred to him. You're going to get us both killed, he said. Maybe, Emily said. But if I'm going to be visible again after 5 years in the dark, then I'm not going to hide. I'm going to shine so bright they can't pretend they didn't see me. Both of us, right out in the open. Let Victoria Hayes come. Let her look at the doctor she thinks she can erase, and let her find out the same thing her father found out. That some people can't be bought and can't be buried and won't go away just because you want them to. She looked at him, at the most feared man in Chicago, lying wounded on her table, bound to her now by a war neither of them had chosen. You came here because you trusted me. Fine. Then trust me. We don't fight her with her weapons. We fight her with mine. And mine have never lost Adrian. Not once. They took my license, my career, my whole life. They never took the truth. And they never will. Outside, dawn broke over Chicago, gray and cold and new. Inside a small clinic on the south side, a wounded man and an invisible woman sat together in the growing light. And somewhere across the city, in a room neither of them could see, Victoria Hayes was already awake, already planning, already smiling, holding in her hands the same file. Both of them had read the file with Emily Carter's name on it, and thinking with the patient certainty of a woman who had learned from a master that anyone can be erased for the right price, that she had finally, after 2 long years, found the one thing that would bring Adrian Moretti to his knees. She had no idea what she was about to walk into. She had no idea that the doctor she meant to erase had already decided to stand in the open. She had no idea that the truth she believed could always be buried was about to come for her the way it had never once come for her father. And Emily Carter standing in the dawn light with a wounded man depending on her. And a war she had never wanted, now wrapped around her life, felt for the first time in 5 years. Not the fear of a woman with everything to lose, but the clear, cold calm of a woman who had already lost everything once and survived and had absolutely nothing left to be afraid of. The plan began, as all real wars do, not with a battle, but with a phone call. It came 6 days after Adrian bled on Emily's table, 6 days in which he had healed enough to walk, and she had spent every spare hour learning the shape of Victoria Hayes' empire. Adrian had given her everything, every name, every business, every quiet crime he knew of, and Emily had done what she used to do with a patient nobody else could read. She had studied it until she found the thing everyone else had missed. And then the phone rang. Adrian's phone, a number he did not recognize at 11 o'clock at night, And he knew before he answered it who it would be, because Victoria Hayes was exactly the kind of woman who would call you herself personally to tell you she was going to destroy you. "Adrian," said the voice on the line. Warm, pleasant, almost fond. "You're a hard man to kill. My people are very embarrassed. I've had to let 2 of them go." "Victoria," Adrian said, and he put the phone on the table between himself and Emily and set it to speaker, and Emily heard for the first time the voice of the woman who wanted her dead. "I hear you've been recovering somewhere very quiet," Victoria said. "I hear you found yourself a doctor, a very special doctor. Tell me, Adrian, does she know? Does she know who I am? Does she know that the girl I'm named after in every way that matters, the woman my father became after that night, all of that traces back to her? Does your doctor know that she's the reason my father died a broken man 3 years later? Because I'd hate for her not to have the full picture." Emily leaned toward the phone. "I know exactly who you are, Victoria," she said. There was a silence on the line, a real one. Emily had surprised her, and both of them knew it, and Adrian watched Emily's face and saw no fear in it at all, only that terrible surgeon's calm. "So you're there," Victoria said, and her voice had changed, gone colder, more interested. "Dr. Carter, live and in person. How wonderful. I've wanted to talk to you for 5 years." "Then talk," Emily said. "You killed my father." "Your father killed a 19-year-old girl named Cassidy," Emily said, and her voice did not rise, did not shake, was the steadiest thing in the room. "He was drunk. He ran a red light. She died on a table while I tried to save her, and I couldn't because there are some things even I can't fix. And then a man came to me the next morning and offered me money to erase the proof and threatened me when I said no. And when I still said no, your family and their friends destroyed my entire life. I didn't kill your father, Victoria. I just wouldn't lie for him. There's a difference, though. I understand it might be hard for you to see it, having been raised by a man who never learned it himself." The silence this time was longer and colder, and when Victoria spoke again, every trace of warmth was gone. "My father was a great man." "Your father was a coward who killed a child and paid to hide it," Emily said. "I'm sorry, I know you loved him. Children usually do love their fathers, even the ones who don't deserve it. But loving him doesn't make it not true. And here's what you need to understand about me, Victoria, because your file couldn't have told you this. Everyone who ever tried to make me lie about your father found out the same thing. I don't. I won't. There is no amount of money and no amount of fear that will make me say a false word. They took my license. They took my name. They put my face in the papers next to the word negligence. And I never lied, not once. So whatever you're planning to threaten me with, save it. Better people than you have tried with more to offer and more to take, and they all learned the same lesson." Adrian watched his enemy be spoken to in a way no one had ever dared speak to her, and he watched it be done by an unlicensed doctor with a room full of borrowed gauze. And he thought, not for the first time that week, that he had spent 15 years being afraid of the wrong things. "You've made a mistake, Dr. Carter," Victoria said finally, very softly. "You've made the same mistake my father made. You think that because you're right, you're safe. You think the truth protects you. It doesn't. My father learned that the truth is just a story, and whoever has the most money and the least mercy gets to decide which story people believe. I learned it at his knee, and I'm going to teach it to you the way he taught it to me. Slowly, completely, until there's nothing left of you but a cautionary tale again. Except this time there won't be a clinic full of grateful poor people to remember your name, because I'm going to take them from you too, one at a time, until you understand that everything you love can be erased the same way you erased my father." The line went dead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily reached out and turned off the phone, and her hand, Adrian noticed, was steady, but her jaw was tight, and there was something in her eyes now that had not been there before. "She's going to hurt my patients," Emily said. "That wasn't a bluff. She meant it. She's going to hurt the people who trust me to get to me." "Yes," Adrian said. "She will, which means we move first." But moving first was not simple, because the next morning at 9 o'clock, the war Victoria had promised began exactly the way she had promised it. Mrs. Alvarez, whose grandson Emily had stitched with the new sutures, was visited by 2 men in a nice car who explained to her very politely that it would be a shame if her grandson's immigration status were to come to the attention of the authorities, and that all she had to do to prevent that was tell them everything she knew about the doctor. Mrs. Alvarez told them nothing. But she came to Emily white-faced and shaking, and Emily held her the way she had held Marcus's mother and understood that Victoria had begun. By noon, there were three more. A man whose small business suddenly faced an inspection that would close him down. A mother whose landlord had abruptly begun eviction. An old woman whose pension check had mysteriously failed to arrive. Every one of them a patient of the doctor. Every one of them squeezed precisely professionally to send a single message. Give us Emily Carter and this stops. Not one of them gave her up. That was the thing Victoria Hayes, for all her intelligence, had failed to understand. She thought she was dealing with a doctor and her clients. She did not understand that Emily Carter had spent 5 years being the only person who ever showed up for these people. The only one who never asked for papers or money or anything at all except the chance to keep them alive. She had built without ever intending to, without even fully realizing it, something Victoria's father had never once had in all his years of power. She had built loyalty, real loyalty, the kind money cannot buy and fear cannot break. By evening, the entire South Side knew that someone was coming for the doctor. And the entire South Side quietly in the way of people who have learned that the only protection they will ever have is each other closed ranks around her. They won't give me up, Emily told Adrian that night, and there was wonder in her voice and grief and a terrible weight because she understood what it meant. She's threatening everything they have, their homes, their kids, their whole lives, and not one of them will give me up. Adrian, I can't let them pay for this. I won't. These are people who have nothing and they're putting what little they have on the line for me, and I can't allow it. You can't stop it, Adrian said gently. That's the part you're not seeing. You think you're protecting them by wanting to run, but you're not. If you run, Victoria doesn't stop punishing them. She punishes them harder for having protected you at all. The only way to protect them is to win. To take Victoria off the board entirely so completely that she can never touch any of you again. He paused. You said it yourself 6 days ago. We make the truth so loud it can't be buried. So, are you ready to make it loud? Emily looked at him for a long moment. Tell me what you found, she said. You said you had something in her empire, something she missed. And here Adrian smiled because this was the part he had been waiting for, the part where the game finally turned. Victoria is brilliant, he said, but she has one flaw, and it's the same flaw her father had, the one that killed a girl named Cassidy. She believes she's untouchable. She believes that because the truth can always be bought, she never has to be careful with it. So she wasn't careful. All those quiet crimes she's built her empire on the last 2 years, all the people she's squeezed and ruined, and worse, she kept records, detailed ones. Because in her mind, records are power, they're leverage, they're how you control people. She never once imagined they could be used against her because in her whole life, the truth has never been used against her family. Her father taught her that the truth is harmless, and that lesson is going to destroy her. You have the records, Emily said slowly. I have a way to them, Adrian corrected. There's a man, her accountant, a quiet, careful man named Weiss who has spent 3 years watching Victoria do things that keep him awake at night, and who is more afraid of her than he has ever been of anything, which means he is exactly the kind of man who, if he thought there was any chance of surviving, it would give up everything he knows. He has the records, all of them, everything she's ever done, and he wants out. He's wanted out for a year. He just doesn't believe there's any way out that ends with him alive. So we give him one, Emily said. So we give him one, Adrian agreed. But Emily understands what this means. If we do this, if we get Weiss to turn over what he has, there's no going back. Victoria will know it was us. She'll come with everything she has left all at once, and it will not be polite anymore. It will be a war, a real one, and people could die. Maybe us. So I'm asking you one more time before we start something we can't stop. Are you sure? Emily thought about Mrs. Alvarez shaking. She thought about the man whose business was being closed, the mother facing eviction, the old woman's missing pension. She thought about Cassidy, 19 years old, dead on a table 5 years ago. She thought about Marcus, who wanted to build things that would outlast him. She thought about 5 years of being invisible, of telling herself that hiding was the same as safety, and she thought about how tired she was suddenly of being afraid. I'm sure, she said. They met Weiss 2 nights later in the back of a church on the west side at 11 at night because a church was the one place Victoria's people would not think to look. And because Weiss, it turned out, was a man who had started praying again after 3 years of doing terrible things for a terrible woman. He was smaller than Emily expected and older, and his hands would not stop moving. And the first thing he said when he sat down across from them was, "She'll kill me. You understand that? Whatever you're offering, she'll find out and she'll kill me, and it won't be fast." "She won't," Adrian said, "because by the time she knows what you've done, it'll already be everywhere. You can't kill a man for a secret that isn't a secret anymore. The only thing keeping you in danger, Mr. Weiss, is that you're the only one who knows. The second what you know belongs to everyone, you're worthless to her. It's the knowing alone that's dangerous, so stop being alone with it." Weiss looked at him for a long moment, and then he looked at Emily, and something in her face, some steadiness, some absence of the greed and fear he'd spent 3 years surrounded by, seemed to reach him. "You're the doctor," he said, "the one she talks about, the one who wouldn't lie for her father." "That's me," Emily said. "She hates you more than she's ever hated anyone," Weiss said, "more than Adrian, and she hates Adrian enough to have spent 2 years on him. But she talks about you like a wound that never closed, like you're the reason for everything." He shook his head slowly. "I never understood it until now. She hates you because you're the proof. You're the living proof that a person could have said no, and her father chose not to, and everything that came after came from that choice. As long as you exist, she can't tell herself the story that there was no other way. You're the person who proves there was always another way." The room went very quiet. Emily had not thought of it that way. She had thought Victoria hated her out of grief, out of loyalty to a dead father. But Weiss had seen something truer. Victoria hated her because Emily's very existence was an accusation. Every day Emily lived doing what she did was a day that said your father could have been a decent man, and he chose not to be. And here is a woman who paid the whole price of decency and never once regretted it. That was the wound that would not close. Not grief, guilt dressed up as grief. The guilt of a daughter who had learned to justify her father and could not do it as long as the woman who refused to lie for him was still out there, still refusing, still alive. "Then help me prove it one more time," Emily said quietly. "Help me prove there was always another way. That's all this is, Mr. Weiss. It's the same thing I did 5 years ago. Somebody powerful did something terrible and wants it hidden, and someone's asking you to help hide it, and you get to decide whether you're the kind of person who does. I made my choice 5 years ago, and it cost me everything, and I would make it again tonight. Now you make yours." Weiss was quiet for a long, long moment. His hands finally went still. "There's a safe deposit box," he said, "under a name that isn't mine. 3 years of records. Every payment, every threat, every name, every crime. I've been building it since the first time she made me do something I couldn't live with, because I thought someday maybe if it got bad enough. I always told myself it wasn't bad enough yet." His voice broke slightly. "It's bad enough now. It's been bad enough for a long time. I was just too scared to say so." He gave them the key, and in doing so without any of them fully realizing it, in the moment he handed Victoria Hayes' empire its death. But Victoria Hayes had not built an empire by being slow. She had eyes everywhere, and one of those eyes saw a nervous accountant leave a West Side church at midnight, and by the next morning she knew not everything but enough. She knew Weiss had met someone. She knew something had moved. And she did the thing that patient, brilliant, merciless people do when they feel the ground shift beneath them. She stopped being patient. The first Emily knew of it was a phone call at 6 in the morning, and it was Sal, Adrian's man, and his voice was tight in a way she had never heard. "They hit the clinic," Sal said, 20 minutes ago. "Fire. It's gone, Doc. Whole thing. I'm sorry, we got there too late." Emily sat down very slowly on the edge of her bed. Everything she had built in 5 years. The room where she had kept people alive. The supplies, the table, the small, careful world she had constructed out of nothing after they took everything. Gone. Burned. In 20 minutes. "Was anyone inside?" she asked, and her voice was very quiet. "No," Sal said. "No, thank God. It was empty. They burned it empty, Doc. That's the message. She's telling you she can take anything, that nothing you build is safe. That's what the fire means." Emily closed her eyes. And then she opened them, and something had changed in her face, and when she stood up, she was not the woman who had sat down. Because Victoria Hayes had made a mistake, the deepest mistake it was possible to make with a woman like Emily Carter. She had tried to break her by taking things away. And Emily Carter had already had everything taken away once 5 years ago, and had learned the one thing that made her impossible to defeat. She had learned that a person who has already survived losing everything cannot be threatened with loss. There is nothing left to hold over her. She has already been to the bottom and found she could stand there and stand back up. "Put Adrian on the phone," Emily said. A moment later, Adrian's voice came on tight with fury. "Emily, I'm sorry, I should have had more people on it. I should have." "Stop," Emily said. "Listen to me, the box. Weiss's box, do we have it?" A pause. "We got it last night, before the fire. She was too late." "Then she just burned an empty building to send me a message," Emily said. "And in doing so, she told me exactly how scared she is." "You don't burn a clinic to scare a woman you're not afraid of, Adrian." "She's afraid. She knows we have Weiss. She knows we have something. And she's trying to make me hurt so badly I can't think straight." Emily's voice was cold and clear and absolutely steady. "It won't work. I've felt worse pain than a burned building. I felt it 5 years ago and I survived it, and I'm still here. So here's what we do. We don't wait. We don't build a careful case over weeks. She'll kill us before we finish. We take everything in that box, every record, every crime, and we make it public, all of it, all at once today, so loud and so wide that by tonight there isn't a single person in this city who hasn't heard it. We do exactly what I told you a week ago. We make the truth impossible to bury, and we do it before she can stop us." "That's the most dangerous thing we could possibly do," Adrian said. "The second it's out, she has nothing left to lose. That's when she's most dangerous." "A cornered animal is dangerous," Emily agreed. "But a cornered animal in a cage the whole world is watching can't do anything but rage. Once the truth is out, Adrian, every move she makes against us confirms it. She can't kill us without proving everything we've said. The truth doesn't just expose her, it protects us. The louder it is, the safer we are. That's the part her father never understood, and it's the part she never learned because they both grew up believing the truth was something you could always buy your way out of. They never once imagined making it too big to buy." Emily's voice dropped, and there was something almost like grief in it now. Grief for a girl named Cassidy, for a boy named Marcus, for 5 stolen years, for a burned clinic, for every person the powerful had ever erased. It's time somebody made it too big to buy. It's 5 years overdue. There was a silence on the line. "You know," Adrian said finally, and there was something in his voice she had never heard before. Something that was not fear and was not calculation. "I have spent my entire life around dangerous people, and you are the most dangerous person I have ever met, and I have never in my life felt safer than I do standing next to you." "Then stand next to me," Emily said, "and let's finish this, today, before she burns anything else." They gathered everyone they could trust, which was fewer people than either of them would have liked in a hotel room downtown that Adrian owned, through 4 layers of names Victoria could never trace. Weiss was there, gray-faced but no longer shaking, because a man who has finally chosen to stop being a coward finds a strange steadiness on the other side of the choice. Sal was there, and the records were there, spread across every surface of the room, 3 years of a merciless woman's every crime laid bare. And it was worse than any of them had imagined. It was not only the crimes against Adrian, it was not only the extortion and the ruined businesses and the squeezed families. Buried in Weiss's meticulous records was the thing that changed everything, the thing that turned a fight over an underground empire into something the whole city would have to reckon with. Because Victoria Hayes had not stopped at money and power. She had gotten into the one business her father had taught her was safest of all, the business of making inconvenient truths disappear. And the records showed in Weiss's careful hand exactly how much she had been paid and by whom to make sure certain crimes committed by certain powerful men never saw a courtroom. Judges, officials, men whose names Emily recognized because some of them were the very men who had destroyed her 5 years ago. Emily stood in that hotel room and understood finally and completely that she had never really left the war she thought she'd lost 5 years ago. It had simply gone quiet and grown and waited, and now here it was again. The same machine, the same men, the same lie that the truth could always be bought. And this time she had it in her hands, all of it, every name, every payment, every erased crime. This isn't just Victoria, she said, slowly looking up from the records. Adrian, look at these names. This is them. This is the same people, the ones who ended my career, the ones who protected Gerald Hayes. Victoria didn't just inherit her father's ruthlessness, she inherited his whole network. The same men who buried Cassidy 5 years ago are in these records buying Victoria's silence today. It's the same machine. It never stopped. It just changed hands from the father to the daughter. Adrian came and looked over her shoulder and his face went hard. Then when this comes out, he said quietly, it doesn't just end Victoria. No, Emily said. And for the first time in 5 years, something that had been broken in her began very slowly to knit back together. It ends all of them. Every man who ever thought the truth was for sale. Every man who looked at me 5 years ago and decided I was disposable. When this comes out, it doesn't just destroy the woman who burned my clinic. It clears my name. It proves I was telling the truth. All of it, after 5 years. Her voice was not quite steady now. After 5 years of being a cautionary tale, of being the negligent doctor, the unstable one, the one they warned patients about, it proves I was right. It proves I was the only one in that whole rotten building who was right. The room was silent. And then Emily Carter did something none of them expected. She sat down in the middle of that hotel room, full of the evidence that would either save her life or end it, surrounded by the proof of everything that had been done to her. And she put her face in her hands, and for the space of about 30 seconds, she let herself weep. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because for 5 years she had carried alone in the dark the knowledge that she had done the right thing and been destroyed for it, and had never once been able to prove it to anyone, and now finally spread across a hotel room was the proof. The proof that she was not what they had said she was. The proof that she had been right all along. Adrian did not touch her. He understood in a way that surprised him that she did not need to be comforted. She needed to be witnessed. So he simply stood beside her and let her weep, and when she was done, he handed her a handkerchief, and she took it and wiped her face and stood back up, and she was the surgeon again, clear and cold and certain. All right, she said, let's finish it. Everything goes out at once. Every record, every name, every crime. We send it to every newspaper, every station, every honest reporter, and every dishonest one, so many places at once that not even this machine can buy them all. And we do it before she can stop us. Weiss, you're going to tell your story on camera tonight, your face, your name, because a document is a document, but a man weeping on camera is the truth, and people believe the truth when they can see it in a human face. Are you ready? Weiss looked at her, this small gray man who had spent 3 years afraid, and something in him straightened. I've been ready for a year, he said. I was just waiting for someone brave enough to go first. He looked at her with something like reverence. You went first 5 years ago, Dr. Carter. You went first, and you paid for it, and you never took it back. I think I've been waiting 5 years for someone like you to show me it was possible to say no and survive it. I'm not sure I did survive it, Emily said quietly. Not really, not until now. You survived it, Adrian said. You just did it alone. That's the part that's over. Whatever happens now, whatever she does, you're not doing it alone anymore. And Emily Carter, standing in a hotel room with the proof of her own vindication in her hands and a war about to break over her head, looked at the wounded man who had brought all of this to her door, and at the frightened accountant who had found his courage, and at the loyal soldier who had come to a fight that wasn't his, and she understood that the invisible woman who had drunk tequila alone at 2:13 in the morning was gone and was not coming back, and that whatever she was now, she was not, would never again be alone in the dark. Across the city, Victoria Hayes stood at the window of an office that had cost more than Emily's clinic had made in a decade, and she looked out at the city she had spent 2 years trying to own, and she felt for the first time in her life the cold touch of a fear she did not understand. Because her people had told her that the doctor's clinic was ash, that her message had been sent, and she had waited all day for the phone call, begging her to stop the call, that always came the call that had come her whole life, because everyone begs eventually. Everyone breaks her. Father had taught her that everyone can be bought or burned or broken. The call had not come, and Victoria Hayes, standing at her window as the sun went down over Chicago, understood without yet knowing how that she had finally done to someone the one thing you must never do. She had taken everything from a person who had already lost everything once. She had tried to threaten a woman with loss who had already been to the bottom of loss and climbed back out. And somewhere in the growing dark of the city, she thought she owned that woman was not begging, was not breaking, was not afraid, but was, instead, at that very moment, quietly, methodically, with the steady hands of a surgeon, loading everything Victoria had ever done into a weapon aimed directly at her heart and preparing to pull the trigger in front of the entire watching world. The trigger was pulled at 9 o'clock the next morning, and by 10, the entire city was on fire in a way no match could ever start. It went out all at once, exactly as Emily had planned it. Every record, every name, every payment. And at the center of it, the thing that made it impossible to ignore or bury or explain away, was a 14-minute video of a small gray man named Weiss sitting in a plain room, looking directly into the camera, telling the truth in a voice that shook at first, and then somewhere around the third minute, stopped shaking as if the very act of finally saying it out loud was healing something in him that had been broken for 3 years. He named Victoria Hayes. He named the judges. He named the officials. He named the men who had made crimes disappear. And he named the price of each one, and he named near the end, in a moment that would be replayed 100,000 times before the day was out, the name of a 19-year-old girl called Cassidy, who had died 5 years ago, and the name of the doctor who had refused to lie about how she died and had been destroyed for it. By 11 o'clock, Emily Carter's name was being spoken on every screen in Chicago. Not as a cautionary tale, not as the negligent doctor, the unstable one, but as the one person 5 years ago who had told the truth when everyone around her sold it. Emily watched it break from the hotel room, standing very still, Adrian beside her, and she did not celebrate because celebrating was not in her, not after everything. But something moved across her face as her own name scrolled past on a screen with the word truth attached to it instead of the word negligence. And Adrian, watching her, understood that he was seeing something he had no right to see. He was seeing a wound 5 years old finally at long last begin to close. "They're saying your name," he said quietly. "They're saying it right this time," Emily said, and her voice was not quite steady. "That's the part I stopped believing would ever happen. I made my peace with dying a liar's death, Adrian. I really did. 5 years I spent making my peace with it, telling myself it didn't matter what they call me as long as I knew the truth. And it turns out it did matter. It mattered the whole time. I just couldn't afford to admit it. But there was no time to rest inside the vindication, because the truth once loud does not make a person safe in a single hour. It makes them safe slowly as it spreads, as it takes root in enough minds that it can no longer be pulled up. And in the hours before that happened, in the terrible gap between the truth going out and the truth becoming undeniable, Victoria Hayes was more dangerous than she had ever been in her life, because Emily had been exactly right about one thing. A woman with nothing left to lose does not surrender. She rages. The first call came at 11:40. It was Sal, and his voice was flat and hard. "They took Weiss," he said. Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" 20 minutes ago, 2 cars. They were fast, and they were professional, and they were gone before we could move. "She's got him." A pause. "Doc, she can't undo what's out there. It's out. But she can make an example. She can make sure everyone sees what happens to a man who talks. That's what Weiss is now. He's a message she's writing to anyone else who might be thinking about telling the truth." Emily closed her eyes. Weiss, the small gray man who had waited 5 years for someone brave enough to go first, and had finally found the courage, and had looked into a camera and healed something in himself by telling the truth. And now Victoria had him. "We get him back," Emily said. "Emily," Adrian said carefully. "We get him back," Emily said again, and she turned on him, and there was steel in her now that even he had not fully seen. "I have spent 5 years watching the powerful take people and erase them, Adrian. I watched them do it to Cassidy. I watched them do it to me. I am not going to stand in a hotel room and watch them do it to a man whose only crime was finally telling the truth, because I made him believe it was safe. I made him a promise. I told him he'd survive it. I looked him in the eye and told him the truth would protect him. If they kill him, then I lied, and I have never lied, and I am not going to start now with a man's life. We get him back." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised even Sal, who had known him 20 years. He nodded. Then we get him back, Adrian said. But we do it my way this part because this part is my world, not yours. You beat her with the truth. That's done, and it's brilliant, and it will end her. But she still has Weiss in a room somewhere, and getting a man out of a room like that is not something you do with a newspaper. That's the part I know. So this once you're going to trust me the way I trusted you when I bled on your table. Can you do that? Emily held his gaze, and then slowly she nodded. Get him back alive, Adrian, she said. That's all. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. He didn't do anything wrong. He finally did something right. Don't let it kill him. What happened next, Emily would only ever know in pieces because Adrian did not let her come. And for once, she did not fight him on it because she understood that her world and his world had finally reached the border between them, and that on the far side of that border, his hands were the ones that knew the work. He took Sal and 4 men she had never met, and he went out into the city he had ruled for 15 years, and he called in every debt, every favor, every terrified loyalty that his name still commanded. And he found in 3 brutal hours the room where Victoria Hayes was keeping Weiss. It was of all places the abandoned pharmaceutical warehouse near the Chicago River, a building Victoria's father had once owned, a building where Adrian would later learn Gerald Hayes had done business of the kind that never saw daylight. She had taken Weiss there deliberately. She had taken him to her father's ground. Because Victoria Hayes, for all her intelligence, was at the end of the day a daughter who had never stopped fighting her father's war, and she wanted to win it on his ground in his building with her father's ghost watching. Adrian did not go in shooting. That was the thing. Emily's presence in his life had changed, though he barely understood it yet. A month ago, he would have gone in shooting. A month ago, he would have solved the problem the way he had always solved problems, with fear and force and blood, and Weiss might have died in the crossfire, and Adrian would not have lost a single hour of the sleep he did not get anyway. Instead, he called her. He called Victoria Hayes from outside the warehouse where she was holding a man he had come to save. And when she answered, her voice was bright and brittle, in a way he had never heard from her, the sound of a woman whose whole world was coming apart and who had decided to burn down as much as she could on the way out. Adrian, she said, come to gloat. Come to make you an offer, Adrian said. There's nothing left to offer me. You saw to that, you and your doctor. Do you have any idea what you've done? By tonight, I'll have nothing. 15 years my father spent building, and I spent 2 years taking yours to add to it, and it's gone. It's all gone because a nobody accountant looked into a camera and cried. Her voice cracked. You want to make me an offer. There's nothing you can give me. I can give you the truth, Adrian said. Not the kind that's on every screen right now. The other kind. The kind you've spent your whole life running from. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost gentle, which was the last thing Victoria expected from him. Your father killed a girl, Victoria. He was drunk, and he ran a light, and a 19-year-old named Cassidy died on a table while a doctor tried to save her. That's not the doctor's fault. That's not Emily Carter's fault. That's your father's fault. He killed her, and then he spent everything he had to make it disappear, and he taught you that this was normal, that this was how the world worked, that the truth was just a thing you paid to make go away. And you believed him. Of course you believed him. You were his daughter, but Victoria listened to me. He lied to you. The truth is not a thing you can buy. You just watched it end your entire empire in a single morning. That's not Emily Carter's doing. That's the truth doing what the truth does. Your father just never lived long enough to find out. There was a long silence on the line. Why are you telling me this? Victoria said finally, and her voice had changed, gone smaller, younger. Because I know what it is, Adrian said, to be a child that nobody protected. I know what it does to you. It makes you build a wall so high nothing can ever hurt you again, and you tell yourself the wall is strength, and it takes you 30 years to find out the wall was the thing hurting you all along. Your father built you into a weapon, Victoria. He aimed you at the whole world because he was too much of a coward to face what he'd done. And you've spent your whole life firing and hating a doctor who never did anything but refuse to lie about a dead girl. You've been fighting the wrong person for 5 years. The person you're actually angry at has been dead for 3 of them. Emily did not hear this call, but she heard about it later from Sal, who had been standing beside Adrian, and Sal told her that in 20 years he had never heard Adrian Moretti speak that way to anyone, and that whatever Adrian had said, it had changed something in the room because Victoria Hayes had gone quiet. And when a woman like that goes quiet, Sal said it is either the most dangerous moment or the moment everything turns and you cannot always tell which until it's over. Here's my offer, Adrian said. Let Weiss go. He's a small man who was afraid for 3 years and finally stopped being afraid. He's not your enemy. He was never your enemy. Let him walk out and I'll give you the one thing you actually need, which is a way out that ends with you alive. The truth is out. There's no undoing it. But there's a difference between a woman who did terrible things and turned herself in and a woman who did terrible things and murdered an innocent man on top of them. One of those women has a life ahead of her somewhere someday. The other one doesn't. That's the only choice you have left, Victoria, not whether you lose. You've already lost. Just what kind of person you are when you lose. And that unlike everything else is a thing no one can take from you and no one can buy. It's yours. It's the only thing that's ever really been yours. The silence stretched on to so long that Adrian thought the call had dropped. And then Victoria Hayes said in a voice that no longer sounded like a queen or a weapon or her father's daughter, but simply like a tired woman at the end of a long war she had never once chosen to fight. He drew, my father. Before, when I was small. He used to draw with me, buildings mostly. He wanted to be an architect before all of it, before the money. He wanted to build things. Emily, when Sal told her that part, had to sit down. Because a boy named Marcus had wanted to build things too, and Emily had held his mother while he died and told a dangerous stranger his name in a bar. And now here was the daughter of the man who had ruined her at the end of everything. Remembering a father who had once wanted to build instead of destroy, and Emily understood in a way that hurt more than the burn clinic, more than the 5 stolen years that everyone in this whole terrible story was somebody's child who had wanted once to build something that would outlast them before the world got its hands on them and taught them to tear things down instead. Then let this be the one thing you build, Adrian said quietly. Let a man walk out of that warehouse alive. It won't fix anything. It won't give you back what you've lost. But it'll be one thing at the very end that you built instead of destroyed. And maybe that's not nothing. Maybe when everything else is gone, that's the only thing that was ever worth anything at all. At 4:17 that afternoon, the door of the abandoned pharmaceutical warehouse opened and a small gray man named Weiss walked out into the daylight on his own 2 feet unharmed. Blinking alive, Victoria Hayes had let him go. She did not walk out after him. She stayed in her father's warehouse on her father's ground, and when the authorities came for her that evening drawn by a truth too loud to ignore, she was still there sitting alone in the dark, and she did not run, and she did not fight, and she went with them quietly. Whatever Adrian had said to her had reached something in her that 2 years of war never had. Not forgiveness. It was far too late for forgiveness. But something, some small, quiet choice at the very end to be a person who let a man live instead of a person who murdered him. The only thing, as Adrian had told her, that was ever really hers. Emily met Weiss on the street outside the warehouse, and when she saw him walking toward her alive, whole, unharmed, she did something she had not planned to do. She crossed the distance between them and put her arms around the small gray man, this stranger she had known for 4 days, and held on to him because she had promised him he would survive telling the truth. And for once, for the first time in 5 years, a promise like that had come true. You lied to me, Weiss said into her shoulder, and she felt him shaking and realized he was almost laughing, the helpless laugh of a man who had been certain he was going to die and had somehow impossibly lived. You told me the truth would protect me. It didn't. It got me kidnapped. The truth got you kidnapped, Emily agreed. Adrian got you back. Sometimes it takes both. But you're alive, Mr. Weiss. You told the truth and you're alive. That's more than 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I told the truth and it nearly killed me, and I had to do it alone. You didn't. That's what's different. That's what we changed. She pulled back and looked at him. You went first when it counted, on that camera. You went first the way I went first, so 5 years ago, except this time somebody caught you. You're not going to be a cautionary tale. You're going to be the man whose face made the whole city believe. Do you understand what you did? Weiss wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I understand that I should have done it a year ago, he said. 2 years ago. I understand that I let people get hurt because I was too afraid, and I have to live with that." He looked at her. "But I also understand that you looked me in the eye and told me it was possible to say no and survive it, and I believed you because you'd done it, and that's the only reason I found the nerve. So whatever I did, Dr. Carter, you did it first. 5 years ago, lone, with nobody to catch you. That's the braver thing. I just had the easier version." Emily did not have an answer for that. She just held on to his hand a moment longer and then let go. The days that followed did not belong to any one moment of triumph. That was not how it worked, Emily learned. The truth did not win all at once in a single clean victory. It won slowly, the way a body heals in fits and setbacks and small quiet mendings. The men whose names were in Weiss's records did not all fall at once. Some of them fought. Some of them still had money and lawyers and friends in high places, and some of them would escape what they deserved, because the world is not just not fully, not ever. But enough of them fell. Enough of the machine that had erased Cassidy and destroyed Emily and protected Gerald Hayes finally, after 5 years, cracked and came apart, that the city was not the same city afterward. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, on a gray afternoon, about 2 weeks after the warehouse, Emily received a letter. It came from the state medical board on official paper in careful official language, and it took her 3 tries to read it all the way through because her hands would not stop shaking and her eyes kept blurring. It was a letter informing her that in light of new evidence, her case was being reviewed, that the findings against her 5 years ago were being formally re-examined, that there was, the letter said in its careful, bloodless official way, reason to believe that a serious injustice may have occurred. Emily sat with that letter in her small apartment for a long time. They were going to give it back. Not all of it. You cannot give a person back 5 years. You cannot give back the patients who died for want of a real clinic, the boys like Marcus who might have lived if she'd had a hospital instead of a room full of borrowed gauze. You cannot give back a reputation once it's been dragged through the mud, not entirely, not cleanly, but her license, her name, the right to be again in the light what she had been forced to be for 5 years in the dark. They were going to give that back. She called Adrian. "They're reviewing my case," she said, and her voice broke on the last word, and she did not try to hide it from him, because somewhere in the last few weeks, she had stopped needing to hide anything from him at all. "Oh, Adrian, that they're going to give me my license back. They're going to let me be a doctor again. A real one, in the light." There was a silence on the line, and when Adrian spoke, his voice was rough in a way she had never heard. "Good," he said. "That's good, Emily. That's the thing they never should have taken. I'm glad it's coming back." "You did this," she said. "No," Adrian said. "You did this 5 years ago. You told the truth and you didn't take it back, and you kept telling it every single day for 5 years in a room nobody could see, and all I did was help you turn the volume up at the end. This was always yours. It just took the world 5 years to catch up to what you already knew." He paused. "You were always a doctor, Emily. They can put it on a piece of paper now, and they should. But you never stopped. Not for one single day. That's the part they can't give you back because you never let them take it in the first place." Emily held the phone and the letter, and outside her window, the gray Chicago afternoon went on, the way it always did, indifferent and ordinary. And inside her, something that had been clenched tight for 5 years finally slowly began to unclench. "There's going to be a place," she said. "A real one this time. A real clinic with my real name on the door for the people who still have nowhere to go. Because getting my license back doesn't help Mrs. Alvarez if she still can't afford a doctor. The whole reason I did what I did in the dark still exists in the light. So I'm going to build it. A real place. Out in the open. Where they can't burn it down without the whole city seeing." "Then build it," Adrian said. "And Emily, let me help. Not because I want to own it. Not because I want anything from it. Just because for 15 years I built things that made the world worse, and I'd like once before I'm done to help build one thing that makes it better. Let me be the man who helped instead of the man who took. Just once. Let me find out what that feels like." Emily was quiet for a moment. "You know," she said, "when I met you in that bar, you asked me why I do what I do. Why I help people who can never repay me in the dark where nobody thanks me. Do you remember what I said? You said it was the only time you were still yourself," Adrian said. "You said it was the one thing they couldn't take." "I've been thinking about that," Emily said. "About why a man who has everything can't sleep and a woman who lost everything can. And I think it's the same answer, Adrian. I think you can't sleep because for 15 years you built a life where nobody could touch you and it kept you safe and it kept you completely alone, and a person can't rest inside a wall like that. There's no rest in a fortress. And I think if you help me build this place, if you spend some of that 15 years of power on keeping strangers alive, instead of keeping strangers afraid, you might, for the first time in a very long time, be able to sleep. She paused. So yes, help me build it. Not because I need your money, though I do, because I think it might be the thing that finally lets you rest. There was a long silence on the line. When did you become my doctor? Adrian said finally, and there was something in his voice that was almost but not quite a laugh, and underneath it, something that was almost but not quite tears. The night you bled on my table, Emily said. You just didn't notice because you were unconscious for the important part. And this time Adrian Moretti did laugh, the real laugh, the rusty one that had come back to life, the night he sat down next to a woman who wasn't afraid of him. And Emily heard it and smiled alone in her small apartment with a letter in her hand that said in careful official language that after 5 years in the dark, she was finally at long last allowed to come back into the light. Across the city, in a cell that was smaller and plainer than any room she had lived in since childhood, Victoria Hayes sat with her back against the wall, and she thought about a father who had once wanted to build things, and a girl named Cassidy she had never met, and a doctor she had hated for 5 years for the crime of being right, and a small gray man she had at the very end decided to let live. And she did not feel peace because peace was not available to her and might never be. But she felt for the first time in a life spent fighting her father's war the strange and terrible relief of a person who has finally put down a weapon she had been carrying so long she had forgotten it was heavy. She had lost everything, and in losing it she had discovered far too late the one thing her father had died without ever learning: that the truth cannot be bought and cannot be burned and cannot be erased no matter how much you are willing to pay, and that the only real choice any person ever has is not whether to face it, but who they decide to be when it finally inevitably arrives. The clinic opened on a Tuesday in the spring, 8 months after a wounded man knocked on a back door in the dark, and Emily Carter stood at the front of it with her real name on the wall and her hands for once perfectly still. It was not a large building. Emily had turned down every offer to make it larger, every offer from Adrian to buy something grand and impressive because she understood something about the people she served that money alone could never teach. They did not need marble. They did not need a lobby that would make them feel small. They needed a clean, warm room where a doctor knew their name and did not ask for their papers, and that was exactly what she built, and not 1 inch more. But it was real. It had her license framed on the wall. The license they had returned to her 3 months after that letter in a hearing where a state official Emily had never met stood up and said on the record in front of witnesses that a grave injustice had been done to her 5 years ago and that the board wished to formally apologize. Emily had not cried at that hearing. She had waited until she got home, and then she had cried for an hour, and then she had never cried about it again, because the wound was finally closed, and you do not keep weeping over a wound once it is healed. Mrs. Alvarez was her first patient. That was not an accident. Emily had planned it that way, had called her personally, and asked her to come in on the very first morning, because Mrs. Alvarez had been visited by 2 men in a nice car and threatened with the loss of everything she had, and had told them nothing. And Emily wanted the first name in the book of her real clinic to be the name of a woman who had protected her when protecting her was dangerous. Mrs. Alvarez came in with her grandson, the one whose forehead Emily had stitched in the old clinic with Adrian's sutures, and the boy had a clean, thin scar, now barely visible. And he was taller, and he shook Emily's hand very seriously, the way boys do when they are trying to be men. "He wants to be a doctor," Mrs. Alvarez said, and her eyes were wet. "Because of you. He says he wants to be a doctor who helps people who have no money. Like you." Emily knelt down to the boy's level. "That's a hard road," she told him honestly, because she did not believe in lying to children, not even kind lies. "People will try to stop you. Some of them will be powerful. And there will be nights you lose someone you tried to save, and it will feel like the worst thing in the world, because it is." She put her hand on his shoulder. "But it's the best work there is. It's the only work I've ever found that's worth the losing. So if you want it, you go and get it. And you don't let anyone tell you that where you come from means you can't. Do you understand me?" The boy nodded wide-eyed and solemn, and Emily thought as she stood back up of another boy, a boy named Marcus, who had wanted to build things that would outlast him, and who had not lived to build them, and she understood that this was how you carried the dead. Not by weeping for them forever, but by making sure the thing they wanted to build got built anyway by someone somewhere, even if it wasn't them. Marcus had wanted to build things that would still be standing after he was gone. And here was a clinic standing that would not exist if a dangerous man had not asked Emily a dying boy's name in a bar one night. Marcus had built this. He just never knew it. Adrian came by that first afternoon, and he did not come the way he had once moved through the world, surrounded by fear, watched by frightened men. He came alone in a plain coat, and he stood in the doorway of the clinic and watched Emily work for a while before she noticed him. And when she did notice him, she saw on his face an expression she had never seen there in all the months she had known him. She saw peace, not the absence of trouble. He still had trouble. A man does not walk away from 15 years of the life Adrian had lived without consequences, and there were still men who wanted him dead, still a long, slow untangling of everything he had built. But underneath the trouble, for the first time, there was peace, the peace of a man who has finally shown something worth his time that does not require anyone to be afraid. "You're sleeping," Emily said. It was not a question. She could see it in his face, in the color of him, and the way he stood. "4 hours," Adrian said. "Sometimes 5. I didn't know a person could feel this way. I thought the not sleeping was just who I was. I thought it was permanent, like an eye color." He looked around the clinic at the clean, warm rooms, at the people in the waiting area, who did not flinch when he entered, because they did not know who he was, because, here he was nobody, just a man in a plain coat. "You told me once that I might be able to rest if I helped build something instead of taking it. I didn't believe you. I thought you were being keen or naive. I've spent 8 months finding out you were right." He met her eyes. "I built things for 15 years that made the world worse. This is the first thing I ever helped build that made it better. And it turns out that's the thing that lets a man sleep. Nobody ever told me. I had to have my own doctor tell me at 48 years old that the reason I couldn't rest was that I'd never done a single thing worth resting after." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "You're a different man than the one who bled on my table," she said quietly. "No," Adrian said. "I'm the same man. I just finally got to be the part of him that 15 years of fear kept buried. That's the thing I understand now that I didn't before. I didn't become someone new. I stopped pretending to be someone I'd built to survive. There's a difference." He paused. "You did the same thing, you know. You didn't become someone new when they gave your license back. You stopped having to hide the person you always were. We're not new people, Emily. We're just finally allowed to be the ones we always were underneath." That was the truest thing anyone had said to Emily Carter in a very long time, and she did not have an answer for it. So she did the thing she had learned to do in the months since a wounded man knocked on her door. She reached out and took his hand in the middle of her clinic in front of everyone, and she held it, and neither of them said anything at all, because some things do not need to be said out loud to be completely understood. There was a hearing for Victoria Hayes that spring. Emily went. She was not required to. No one asked her to. Adrian tried gently to talk her out of it because he did not understand why she would want to sit in a room and look at the woman who had burned her clinic and threatened her patients and hunted her through the city. But Emily went, and she sat in the back, and she watched Victoria Hayes stand before a court and answer for the thing she had done, and it was not the triumph Emily might once have imagined it would be. It was not satisfying. It was only sad, because Victoria did not fight it. That was the thing that undid Emily sitting in the back of that courtroom. The brilliant, merciless woman who had spent 2 years taking an empire and 5 years hating a doctor stood before the court and did not fight, did not lie, did not buy or threaten or erase. She told the truth, all of it. The judges, the officials, the crimes, her father. And when it was done, when she had said it all, she asked to make a statement, and the court allowed it, and Victoria Hayes turned in that courtroom and looked directly at Emily Carter in the back row and spoke to her. "I spent 5 years hating you," Victoria said, and her voice was steady and empty of everything it had once been full of. "I told myself you killed my father. I needed that to be true, because if it was true, then he was a good man who was wronged, and I was his avenging daughter, and everything I did made sense. It was a story I couldn't live without. and you were the only thing in the world that proved it was a lie." She paused. "My father killed a girl. He was drunk and he killed her and he paid to hide it, and he taught me that this was how the world worked. And you were the one person who wouldn't help him, and you paid for it and you never took it back. Not in 5 years, not when it would have been so easy, not when it cost you everything. Every day you existed doing what you did, you proved that there was another way, that he could have been a decent man and chose not to be. I couldn't stand that. So I tried to erase you, and I couldn't because you can't erase the truth, no matter how much you're willing to pay. And I know that now, and I knew it the moment your accountant looked into that camera, and I felt my whole world come apart." She took a breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think you should. I did terrible things, and I'd have done worse. I just wanted to say in front of everyone on the record so it can never be erased that you were right. 5 years ago, you were the only one who was right, and I'm sorry. Not because it changes anything, because it's true, and you spent 5 years being called a liar for telling the truth, and someone should say it out loud in a room full of people who have to write it down." The courtroom was silent. Emily sat very still in the back row. She had come expecting to feel something like victory, or something like closure, and instead she felt something she had not expected at all, which was grief. Grief for Cassidy, dead 5 years, who had started all of it. Grief for a father and daughter who had both wanted once to build things and had learned instead to destroy them. Grief for the 5 years that had been taken from her that no apology could give back. And underneath all of it, unwillingly, a small, terrible thread of grief for Victoria Hayes herself, a woman who had been made into a weapon by a coward and had spent her whole life firing at the wrong target and had figured it out only when there was nothing left. Emily did not forgive her. Victoria had been right about that. Some things should not be forgiven, and Emily was not a saint, and she would not pretend to a grace she did not feel. But she stood up in the back of that courtroom, and she met Victoria Hayes's eyes across the whole length of the room, and she nodded once. Not forgiveness, acknowledgement. One person who had told the truth, recognizing another who had finally, far too late, learned how. And Victoria understood it, and something in her face broke and then strangely settled, and she turned back to the court, and she took what was coming to her, and she did not fight it. That was the last time Emily ever saw her. The months went on. The clinic thrived in its small, quiet way. Weiss came to work there, of all things, running the books, because a man who had spent 3 years keeping careful records of terrible crimes turned out to be very good at keeping careful records of ordinary mercy. And because he had told Emily one afternoon that he could not go back to the work he used to do, that every ledger reminded him, and that the only place his hands felt clean was in a building where the numbers added up to people getting better instead of people getting hurt. Emily hired him on the spot. She often said, the best decision she made that year, and she made a great many good decisions that year. And slowly, in the way these things happen, without either of them ever quite deciding it on a particular day, Emily Carter and Adrian Moretti built a life. Not the life either of them had expected. Emily did not become a woman who forgot what she had survived, and Adrian did not become a soft man with no shadows in his past, because his past was real, and its consequences were real, and there were things he had done that no amount of clinic building could erase. They both knew that. They never pretended otherwise. Theirs was not a love that fixed everything, because that kind of love does not exist, whatever the stories say. Theirs was the other kind, the real kind. Two people who had each survived the worst thing that could happen to them, who had each been broken in a specific and permanent way, and who had discovered against all odds that their broken places fit together, that the very thing that made each of them impossible to break was the thing that let them finally be gentle with each other. "I don't understand it," Adrian said to her once late at night in the small apartment above the clinic where they had ended up living, because Emily refused to live anywhere she couldn't hear if someone knocked on the door in the dark. "I spent 15 years believing that caring about someone was the one weakness that would get me killed, that the safest thing in the world was to love nothing. And you walked into my life, and you were the most dangerous thing that ever happened to me, and instead of getting me killed, you saved my life. Not once, over and over. You keep saving it. How does that make sense?" Emily thought about it for a while, the way she thought about everything, carefully turning it over. "Because you had it backwards," she said finally. "That's all. You thought caring made you weak, so you built a wall, and you thought the wall was strength. But the wall was the weakness, Adrian. The wall was the thing that was killing you. It kept everyone out, including the people who might have saved you, including yourself. You were so afraid of losing something that you made sure you never had anything to lose. And that's not safety. That's just a slower kind of dying. She reached over and took his hand in the dark. Caring about someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you breakable. Yes, that's different. But a thing that can't break can't bend either, and a thing that can't bend eventually snaps under its own weight. You were about to snap when you walked into that bar. I could see it. You were a man made entirely of wall, and there was almost nothing left of the person behind it. Loving me didn't make you weak. It made you real. And real things can be hurt. But real things can also heal and grow and rest. Walls can't do any of that. Walls just stand there getting heavier until they fall. Adrian was quiet for a long time. You should have been a philosopher, he said finally. I'm a doctor, Emily said. It's the same job. You just work on a different part of the person. They were married in the fall in the clinic after hours with Weiss and Sal and Mrs. Alvarez and her grandson and a dozen other patients who had become over the months something closer to family. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd of powerful people, no photographers. Emily wore a simple dress and Adrian wore a plain suit, not the expensive kind. And Mrs. Alvarez cried through the whole thing, and Weiss gave a toast that started as a joke about his own cowardice and ended somehow with the entire room in tears, because he said that he had spent his whole life believing that the brave people were the ones who were never afraid, and that he had learned from watching Emily Carter that the brave people were the ones who were terrified and told the truth anyway, and that he was standing in a room full of people who were alive because one woman had been that kind of brave, and that he was prouder than he had ever been of anything to have finally once at the end found the nerve to be that kind of brave himself. And then the little boy, Mrs. Alvarez's grandson, the one who wanted to be a doctor, tugged on Emily's sleeve and asked her in the way children ask the questions no one else will, whether she was scared back then, when she was all alone and everyone was against her, and she had lost everything. The room went quiet. Emily knelt down to him the way she had on that first morning, and she thought about how to answer because she did not lie to children. Yes, she said, I was scared every single day for 5 years. I want you to hear that because someday you're going to be scared too when you're doing the right thing and it's costing you everything, and you're going to think that being scared means you're doing it wrong. It doesn't. Being scared just means you understand what you're risking. The people who aren't scared are the people who don't understand. She held his gaze. I was scared the whole time, and I did it anyway. That's not the opposite of being brave. That is being brave. The bravest thing I ever did, I did while I was terrified alone with everyone against me, certain I was going to lose. And I did lose for a while, for 5 years, and then slowly I won. But I didn't win because I stopped being scared. I won because I refused to let being scared make me lie. That's the whole secret. That's everything I know. You hold on to the truth and you tell it and you don't let go. No matter how scared you are or how much and eventually, not always, but eventually more often than you'd think, the truth is stronger than everything that's trying to bury it. The boy nodded very seriously the way he did, and Emily Carter stood back up in the clinic that bore her name, surrounded by the people she had kept alive, and the man she had against every expectation come to love. And she understood that the woman who had sat alone at a bar at 2:13 in the morning, drinking a tequila, she barely touched, invisible in a city full of powerful people, certain that the best of her life was behind her, had been wrong about only one thing. She had been right that she had survived betrayal, right that she had lost everything, right that she had spent years helping people, in the dark where no one could see. But she had been wrong that night to believe it was the end of her story. It was the middle. The city still whispered about Adrian Moretti sometimes, though the whispers had changed. They no longer spoke of the most feared man in Chicago. They spoke, when they spoke of him at all, of a man who had walked away from an empire of fear and helped build a clinic on the South Side, and no one could quite explain it. And the people who tried always came back in the end to the same answer. They said he had met a doctor. They said she had changed him. They said the most dangerous man in the city had finally met the one person in the world who wasn't afraid of him, and that she had shown him somehow how to be a human being again. And that was true as far as it went, but it was not the whole truth, and Emily Carter, who did not lie, would have told you the rest if you had asked her. She would have told you that it was never about a dangerous man being saved by a good woman, that the story people wanted to tell was too small and too simple and left out everything that mattered. She would have told you that they had saved each other over and over in 100 small ways, that he had pulled her back into the light as surely as she had pulled him out of the dark, that his 15 years of ruthless knowledge had gotten Weiss out of a warehouse alive, and her 5 years of stubborn truth had given him a reason to sleep at night, and that neither of them alone could have done what the two of them, broken and unbreakable, and finally not alone, had done together. She would have told you about Cassidy, 19 years old, who died on a table and started all of it, and whose name was on a small plaque by the clinic door, because Emily had put it there so that the girl who was erased would be remembered every single time someone walked in to be healed. She would have told you about Marcus, 14, who wanted to build things that would outlast him, and who had, in the end, built exactly that because a clinic was standing that would not exist without him, and it would go on standing and healing people long after everyone who remembered him was gone. She would have told you about Victoria Hayes, a weapon made by a coward who had learned too late the one lesson that could have saved her, and who had, at the very end, let a man live instead of killing him, and had thereby proven that even the most broken person is never entirely without the power to choose who they are. And she would have told you the thing she had learned, the thing that was worth more than the license they gave back and the name they cleared, and the love she never expected to find. She would have told you that the world is full of people who believe the truth can be bought and burned and buried and erased, and that they are wrong, that they have always been wrong, that the truth is the one thing in all the world that cannot be destroyed by anyone willing to pay for its destruction, because the truth does not belong to the powerful or to the rich or to the ruthless. It belongs to whoever is brave enough to hold on to it while they are terrified alone and certain they will lose. Emily Carter had been that person. She had held on to the truth for 5 years in the dark, alone with everyone against her and everything to lose. And the truth had held on to her right back. It had cost her everything, and then it had given everything back and more. And it had proven in the end the one thing she had believed all along, the belief that had kept her breathing through 5 years of being called a liar for telling the truth. Some people cannot be bought. Some people cannot be buried. Some people cannot be erased, no matter how much you are willing to pay or how bright you burn their whole world down. Emily Carter was one of them. She always had been. And in the end, the whole city learned her name and learned it right, and it was never spoken again as a warning, but only forever after as the truth.